This is the AMD Radeon 5700 XT. It came out July the 7th, 2019 for $399 MSRP. It has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and today I can find it in my local area on the Facebook Marketplace for $200. But now I want to ask the question, how well does the 5700 XT stack up in 2023? And in order to do that, I have picked out a few different games that I want to test on the GPU. Every one of these games are less than 1 year old, and they're all newer than the GPU itself. And so I think these games are totally fair to evaluate against the GPU when asking this question. Graphics cards are more expensive than ever before, and so people need to know, hey, what used options are on the market that I can buy that are actually kind of worth it? And so today we're starting the series off with the 5700 XT. And right now I'm going to show you all the hardware specifications I'm using on my test bench in order to evaluate the GPU. And now I need to play a quick ad from my sponsor, and then after that we're getting right into the GPU benchmarks. Are you still paying full retail prices for your Windows 10 activation keys? If so, why? Go to SCDKey.com and pick yourself up a Windows 10 Pro activation key for as little as $22.09. Actually, you can save yourself another 25% by entering my personal discount code. And there's no need to worry because these keys are completely legal and safe, and they actually work. You can see me activating Windows here right now. While you're on the website, feel free to check out other pieces of software like Microsoft Office. Thank you, SCDKey, for sponsoring today's video. And now we're starting off with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 2022. And we're starting off at 1440p on the balance preset, and we will then go down to 1080p on the balance preset. Most of my benchmarks will be ran on the medium preset just because ultra is overkill. And after all, we're targeting budget gaming here. We're not talking the best of the best. And so I think medium is definitely where most gamers will actually play if they're using a 5700 XT. And so I ran the in-game built-in benchmark for Modern Warfare 2. And so as you can see at 1440p, the card is doing quite well on the balance preset. We're averaging about 90 FPS, and we are definitely having some peaks and some dips as low as like the 60s around explosions, all the way up to a little bit above 100 FPS. And so it's not exactly the best gaming experience on the planet, but I mean, if you pick up this graphics card for $200 used and you're able to play Modern Warfare 2 1440p and average 90 FPS, that's not so bad. And now we're doing the exact same test once again, but this time it's at 1080p on the balance preset. And as you can see, our average frame rate is now 110 to 112 FPS. I really love that in my games. I love to be above 100 FPS. But the active frame rate, or the actual frame rate in real time, is all over the place, but it's above 120 fairly consistently here. We're even peaking above 130 FPS in some cases. And now you can see our overall average has risen up to 121 FPS. And so that is awesome. Overall, the utilization is 98 to 99%, which is great. The temperatures are great as well. And so again, the 5700 XT is a phenomenal GPU on a budget for esports titles like Call of Duty. But now let's try something a little bit more demanding with Gotham Knights. Gotham Knights came out back in October of 2022, and you might have seen my videos on the game talking about all of its terrible performance issues. The game launched with many performance issues. However, the game has received a few patches since launch, and it is now running a lot better. And so I figured it would be a great test for the 5700 XT. And as you can see with the 5700 XT, we have an average frame rate of around 91 to 92 FPS, except for when we get on the bike. Now, anytime we've gotten on the bike in this game, the frame rate definitely goes down, so that is nothing new. But once we get off the bike, the frame rate does go back up. You can see in combat, we're closer to 100 FPS, sitting comfortably around 95 FPS in some cases. But only whenever we get on the bike do we see the frame rate actually plummet. But overall, the performance here, in my opinion, is quite impressive. Again, the card came out in 2019 and it only has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and Gotham Knights is not exactly the most optimized game on the planet. And so I'm quite impressed here. If you can pick this card up for $200 or less in 2023, I think it's a great gaming experience so far. But now let's check out 1080p. Okay, and now we're switching over to 1080p. Again, we're on the medium preset. And as you can see here, our average frame rate is above 120 FPS right off the bat. That is very impressive. And as you can see, once again, once you get on the bike, the frame rate does start to dip down a little bit. We are now below 120, But once we get in the combat, I fully expect the frame rate to go back up again to be about where we would expect it to be. Now, the overall utilization here at 1080p on the GPU is dropping a little bit. Instead of staying consistent at 99%, it's actually dropping down to 90%, 95%, 96%. And so that's not exactly what you would want to see, but 1080p is also more CPU bound than it is GPU bound, so that could be playing a factor here. The GPU temperature is good overall, and as you can see, once again, we're back off the bike in combat, and we are definitely above 120 FPS. In this case, we're even seeing 130s to 140s in some cases, but we're hovering more around the 120s. And so that is a great frame rate, again, for a game that is this new, this demanding, and honestly on a card that's quite old at this point. And so overall, I would definitely recommend the 5700 XT for a cheap price on Gotham Knights. But now we got to take a look at the newest game on this list, and that is Hogwarts Legacy. Now, you know I've done a lot of Hogwarts Legacy testing here on the channel, and again, it's a game that is very CPU bound. It's also a game that launched with performance problems on the PC. It's not the most optimized game out there, and so I'm very curious to see how the 5700 XT performs at 1440p on the medium preset. And so, of course, I took us to Hogsmeade. I think that is a great place to really test your system overall. This is a very demanding portion of the game. Again, 1440p on the medium preset. You can see we're averaging about 74 to 75 FPS. The GPU temperature is fairly decent, around 65C, and our GPU utilization is about where we would expect it to be with 98 to 99% utilization. The overall VRAM usage is still below 6 gigabytes, so that's pretty good. We still have some room to spare there on our overall 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but still the frame rate is not that bad. You're in the 70s and you're in Hogsmeade, which is known to be quite demanding. But now I want to start walking outside of Hogsmeade, and I want to get on the broom, and I want to fly around, and I want to see what the frame rate does. And as you can see, walking out of Hogsmeade, our frame rate is already starting to dip. We're now below 70 FPS. We're peaking closer to 60, and now we just dropped below 60 FPS and we hit 59 FPS for the first time. And now getting on the broom and flying around, we're in the 50s, like regularly in the 50s, 57 FPS, 58 FPS. And so now we're definitely below 60 FPS, and that's not where we want to be, but we're still pretty close to it. And again, you got to remember, this is 1440p and we're flying around, so it's kind of like Gotham Knights with a bat cycle. You know, once you get on that, the frame rate goes down, but once you get off, the frame rate goes up. So as you can see, we got off the broom, we go in the Hogwarts, and now the frame rate is starting to climb back up. Instead of being low 50s, we're now going up to the 60s and 70s again. And so there you can expect to be about around 70 FPS, give or take, depending on the area, at 1440p in Hogwarts Legacy. But now let's switch over to 1080p and see how well that performs. Okay, now we're back in Hogsmeade at 1080p on the medium preset, and our frame rate is already higher than it was before. Before we were in the 70s, now we're in the 90s, pushing closer to 100 FPS. There are some areas that are causing us to dip a little bit below the 90s. You know, we're briefly touching the 80s or whatever, but on average, I would say we're close to the 90 marker. You can see the average frame rate here is about 91 to 92 FPS. The GPU utilization is where we want it to be at 99%, and our VRAM utilization is also good as well at 5 gigabytes, a little bit above 5 gigabytes once again. And now stepping outside of Hogsmeade, just like we saw before, our frame rate does start to dip a little bit more. Instead of being at 90 FPS, we're now in the 80s, and our overall average has started to come down from 90 to 89. And now we're getting on the broom and we're flying around, and once again, the frame rate does continue to dip down a little bit. And as you can see on the broom in the open world flying around, our frame rate is definitely starting to come down a little bit. That's exactly what happened at 1440p. So the exact same thing is happening here at 1080p. But as we get closer to Hogwarts, the frame rate does slowly start to increase once again. And so again, it's just like Gotham Knights on the bat cycle. Whenever you get on your broom, you fly around, you see more of the open world, your frame rate is going to dip a little bit. But when you're running around on the grounds, the frame rate does start to come back to where you would expect it to be. And so now inside of Hogwarts itself, you can see we're comfortably in the 90s on our frame rate, and that average is starting to come up a little bit. As a side note, I absolutely love these two little guards right here because they interact with one another and they start to kill each other, and I think that is just an awesome feature of the game. But now let's switch over to our next title. And now for our final game, we have Spider-Man Remastered. Now look, I understand Spider-Man launched on the PS4, and so it's not necessarily a quote-unquote new game, but this is the remastered version of the game, and it has been updated with better graphics and overall visuals for the PC, and it only released on the PC back in August of 2022, and so it is a newer title, and it's definitely a pretty demanding title. And so overall, I wanted to see how well the 5700 XT could perform in Spider-Man Remastered. And as you can see at 1440p on the medium preset, swinging through the city, we have an average frame rate of 98 FPS, give or take. And in some areas, we're above 100 FPS, but in other areas, especially in combat, we start to dip down to the 70s and 80s. And of course, the frame rate is all up and down. And so overall, it's not the most consistent frame rate or frame time or the best experience on the planet. But again, you're talking about a GPU with 8 gigabytes of VRAM that came out in 2019, and you can get it for $200 on the secondhand market. That's not bad at all. And again, we have many instances of where the frame rate is peaking well above 100 FPS at 1440p on the medium preset. And so this is definitely way more than just playable in 2023. But now let's switch over to 1080p, still using the medium preset, and let's see how well the game performs. And you can see right off the bat, swinging through the city, we have above 120 FPS. In fact, it says our average is 150. Well, it's dropping a little bit here to the 140s, but still, our overall frame rate here at 1080p is absolutely phenomenal on the medium preset. And the overall graphical fidelity and visuals are not bad either at medium. I mean, it still looks really sharp. The game looks good overall. I mean, looks are subjective, but that is my opinion. And in combat, you can see we're still around 150 FPS. And I mean, that is absolutely phenomenal. And overall, I think this game runs incredibly well on the 5700 XT. And so if you bought a 5700 XT, I think you got your money's worth. I really do. I mean, even on a title as new and as demanding as Spider-Man Remastered, the GPU is holding up incredibly well. The best part here is you can actually increase the settings if you want to. I mean, on the medium preset at 1080p, if you're getting 150 FPS, then you can definitely take it up to high or even very high if you choose to do so. It completely depends on the experience that you want. Well, I think you know my answer, but just in case you don't, is the 5700 XT worth it in 2023? In my opinion, yes it is. Surprisingly, yes, it is. I just ran this card against multiple titles that are less than a year old, and as you saw, the card handled every one of those games beautifully. Now, as long as you're not trying to run 4K ultra settings or max settings in the game, I think you can expect a totally well-rounded and very reasonable gaming experience. As long as you can get the card for $150 to $200, it's definitely a recommend in my book, so I definitely recommend it. And overall, if you like this video, hit the like button because that lets me know you like this type of content, and then I'll keep making this type of content. So drop a comment, hit the like button, do something to let me know you want to see more type of content like this. But that's all I got. If you're new, please subscribe. I would really love to have you part of the community. And until next time, E-Rock out.